Hello guys, and welcome to the Dragon Ball Radio podcast, where me and Hyokai, my co-host, explore all of the Dragon Ball universe together and we go through topics week by week. Please say hello.
Hi guys, I'm excited to actually have you guys hearing this. It's something that me and Nathan have actually been working on behind the scenes for a little bit. We were really excited to kind of have this collab of a podcast, planning on uploading it on both channels and trying to have a cool little upload schedule so that everybody can kind of mix as one community. Since I know that there are people in Nathan's community that are not in my community, and there are people in my community that aren't in Nathan's community, and it's a good way to try to just get more people together that love Dragon Ball in one place and in, one kind of discussion or chat setting. And exactly like what Nathan said, we're here to have a discussion on anything that is a problem in the Dragon Ball universe, be that small little problems or major, community shifting problems. We're here to talk about it, and we're here to talk a little bit more candid and laid back since it is more of a podcast style. So I'm excited. I hope you guys are excited. I definitely want you guys to let us know what you guys want to see from the podcast in the future, but thanks for doing this with me, at least, Nathan, because usually I say thanks for having me on, but I mean, this is an adventure, so...
Yeah, this is ongoing. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I appreciate you being just as hyped, like I said, behind the scenes, as you are, as I am. I'm happy that we're both as hyped to hop in on this journey together, and I think that we have a really, really good first kind of little debate or community idea that we kind of want to put our thoughts and opinions on, but I'm going to throw it back to Nathan to let him introduce his topic today.
Yeah, of course. Canon is essentially the topic, and I know if you guys are going to click off a video, please do not, or a podcast, whatever you want to call it. Again, we are going to speak more sort of candidly and I guess less professional, but sort of, just more casual, I guess, because we are friends at the end of the day. We are not just, sort of business partners. We are, friends. We do talk outside of, the Dragon Ball world. So, yeah.
Like every day, if not every other day.
Yeah, so we're going to just speak more sort of candidly and openly about this topic, and there will be cuss words, there will be cussing because we curse quite frequently, not to be edgy about it.
Oh, we're just going to feed into our Discord meme. It's going to be great. The edgelords. Oh, it's the edgelord podcast.
The white edgelords, bro. But anyway, so Canon is a huge factor in the Dragon Ball community. I'm not going to say the Dragon Ball world because this is really just a community issue. Canon, it exists all throughout the community, but Toriyama, Toei, and anyone that actually works on Dragon Ball has never stated anything as canon. So the topic today is there is no such thing as canon in Dragon Ball, kind of like, the parent from Harry Potter. There's no such thing as magic. And then, so basically, there is no such thing as canon, at all, because Toriyama has never said canon and all of that stuff. And it's really stemmed from, community outrage, I guess, because I guess the community really wants there to be a definitive continuity between, the Dragon Ball universe, but it's just not going to happen. Japan doesn't really work that way. It's not like, Star Wars, how everything is numbered and everything is, all in order, and there's canon and there's non-canon stuff, legends and stuff like that. It's really not like that. And it's quite interesting how the Dragon Ball community, they're just sort of yearning for a canon, an official statement from Toriyama. And more people have caught on that, there's no such thing as canon. There's not really anything that is official or deemed official besides the original manga. That even then we can dismiss that the original manga is canon because, what is canon at the end of the day? I mean, I guess you can debate that Toriyama, anything that's Toriyama written is canon that includes the original manga, but not every idea in the Dragon Ball manga, not every character or not every scenario in the Dragon Ball manga was actually conceived by Toriyama fully. I mean, there's a lot of influence from, Dragon Ball, for Dragon Ball, from like several different movies and pop culture references and stuff. So Toriyama gets influenced all the time, and also his editors, have had, tons of say in what Toriyama has done within the Dragon Ball manga. So there are no sort of, there's no such thing as a pure Dragon Ball experience, 100% Toriyama. Of course, the manga is the closest thing because it's his creation, but still there's stuff that, the editors wanted to have, thrown into the Dragon Ball manga, so it's not 100% Toriyama, approved, I guess. I mean, it's Toriyama approved, but it's not 100% in Toriyama's head, left and, went onto the page. There's no, not really anything like that, so there is no such thing as Dragon Ball canon, so yeah.
No, exactly, and it's a major problem actually, not even just in our community, but in communities as a whole.
Right.
Just an argument again for a definitive timeline, a definitive this, a definitive that. And I'm glad that you said the word in your little monologue that you had, because the word canon shouldn't be used. The word continuity should be used. That in any time that I record or try to do a video on it, I always try to use the word continuity because it just sounds better. You don't sound... I don't know, because canon just has such a negative continuity to the word itself. Like, you just trying to state that there is some kind of canon when clearly what we're about to talk about for the next 40 minutes shows that there is zero canon, no matter what level you really want to go on. But there are plenty of different continuities, and that is something that we're here, to argue. And I guess is the first block of things, just talking about that you hinted on a little bit, is the manga continuity, which I feel is the truest thing to a canon that you can have, quote unquote. I will say that throughout the video, even though I know I just said we need to make canon irrelevant as a word, but it is something that is engraved into pretty much everybody's lexicon. So I will personally try to fix myself. I hope you guys can as well. But I guess let's dive into the manga continuity, Nathan.
Yeah, I mean, like, one brief, thing you touched on is, canon has such a negative stigma, I guess. It's really weird. And I get it, canon just doesn't exist. So you saying, this is canon, that's not canon, it kind of makes you sound a bit casual, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just weird how over time in 2018 canon has such a negative stigma, and you can sort of point out fans that say, the word canon, like GT is not canon, that's starting to get more and more fizzled out as time goes on. But anyway, sticking to the Dragon Ball manga, there's, tons of, stuff that kind of points to the manga, there shouldn't be, the manga being called, 100% canon because, okay, so you have Dr. Slump, and, Toriyama, he made Dr. Slump before Dragon Ball with Senbei Norimaki, Arale Norimaki, one of the best manga that Toriyama has ever done, including one-shot works. Dr. Slump is brilliant. And, with Dragon Ball, they have that little crossover. So Goku, chases down General Blue, and they land in Penguin Village with Arale, and then Arale fends off against General Blue, and so, yeah, that happens. So Goku travels to Penguin Village, sort of by accident, I guess, and, yeah, so then Dr. Slump is that cool? Like, is that considered canon to the Dragon Ball manga? And if Dr. Slump is considered, canon to the Dragon Ball manga, then also, Wonder Island, which is which is the first, actually, a manga that Toriyama has ever published in Weekly Shonen Jump. Of course, he's had, unpublished works like A Wayward World and Mysterious Rain Jack before, but Wonder Island and also Wonder Island Chapter 2, which was also called Wonder Island Harry's Big Adventure, originally before it got the 2, subtitle added to it. But anyway, so Wonder Island 2, that has 3 cops within that manga that appear in Dr. Slump, Gala and Pagos. So they go into Dr. Slump, which is canon to Dragon Ball apparently. So is Wonder Island, which is canon to Dr. Slump, which is canon to Dragon Ball. So is Wonder Island canon to Dragon Ball?
Canonception.
Yeah, it's like there's so much to really talk about here. There's so many characters from other other Akira Toriyama works that appear in Dr. Slump, which, Dr. Slump is apparently canon to Dragon Ball manga, so, like, all of Toriyama's works is almost, like, canon to Dragon Ball in a way, in this really weird, sort of what if, and that's just ridiculous. Like, it's like, almost like an Akira Toriyama sort of manga universe, I guess, the Toriyama MCU. So it's like, why, like, is canon so glorified when, so many other things like Dr. Slump, Wonder Island, Polar and Roy, other Toriyama manga, why is it so glorified when it really doesn't make any sense to begin with? It's kind of silly to think about canon, and it's fine if you think about it like once in a while, like, is this canon? Does this work in the continuity? Does this not line up with this thing? It's fine to think about and sort of talk about, but really don't get over, don't overthink it, basically, because you're just going to make yourself confused, and it's just a bad stigma anyway to talk about canon. It's kind of weird how, all throughout the 2000s and, all of that stuff, before this sort of current Dragon Ball YouTube era, everyone was like, GT is not canon, the movies aren't canon, which movies go into this, continuity, and in 2018, most of that has kind of fizzled out, barring a few YouTube channels and articles that still talk about it. But yeah, the Dragon Ball manga, is sort of has Dr. Slump, and also, Dr. Slump has references to other Toriyama manga. So it's, if you start thinking about it like that, it's just, your brain explodes. So the Dragon Ball manga, and, even though Toriyama penned the Dragon Ball manga, as we were talking about before, it's not 100% his ideas, because he had influences from his editors and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah, and exactly. And I'm glad that's the point you wanted to end yours on, because that was the point I was going to start mine on. You touched on it a little bit earlier, but I mean, highly successful manga artist, already, millionaire off of his idea, decides he wants to make a shonen, kung fu kind of, little manga in the style of some kind of adventure. So he starts to do this, and the thing that is incredible to the canon dispute is that without outside influences from his editors, certain arcs either would not have taken place or would not have taken place the way that they did to, the story that we know and love, because there are plenty of times in Toriyama's career where his ideas, either for or not for Dragon Ball, were flat out rejected, not published. He was told to change many things. And that's a big thing for a storyteller. I mean, what if we went through the Frieza arc, and during, the first final fight with Frieza, with the Genki Dama, what if that was the last time you saw Frieza? You don't get Namek blowing up, you don't get any of that. Goku goes back, so there's, no Trunks coming to really, save the day before Goku gets home. Like that stuff doesn't happen. So, I mean, there's no canon again. And this is just another proof to that, is that even the manga, the thing that comes from the author's hand, both, dialogue and the actual artistry of the manga panels, both coming from his mind, and it's not even canon to what he wants for the story. So, I mean, you get into this huge paradoxical, like, loophole when you try to talk about what is canon and what isn't. And, revisions of mangas and different mangas coming out, like the Kanzenban and stuff, change small little parts in the actual, franchise. What happens in the Kanzenban, with the different ending? I know it's not majorly different, but I mean, it is, a different canon than to what the original manga was. So, I mean, like, that's a completely different, part of the TCU, because it's a different manga than the original manga. And that's what's crazy about this. And adding in that a anime was created with several spin-offs, several different TV specials, a list of games, a list of movies, and tons and tons of more material, it just the TCU gets really complicated, man. And talking about, just what kind of, like, constant there is in it is crazy. It's just as hard as Marvel, and the only way I think that we will be able to fix it is to do what all of the comics did and do just a full reset. Everybody gets new power levels, power scaled exactly at one thing, and then we just go from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous to really wrap your head around what's canon, and it's with, like, Marvel comics and all of that stuff. The continuity changes every single time, and Dragon Ball's a bit different because it's one flowing story, with several spin-offs. With Marvel, it's like, a year worth of one story, and then it gets completely switched up with the same characters. Dragon Ball's a bit different, but it's also like, you can't really define what is canon, and even with the source material, what's trippy, as we said, you can't really determine that, like, Toriyama had 100% involvement. I mean, he did have 100% involvement with Dragon Ball, like the manga, but, all of his ideas didn't make it onto the page, and some of his ideas were skewed and edited by his, editors. So, is it really his? Is it really a pure Toriyama experience? The most pure Toriyama manga is essentially his ones before he got his first editor, which was Torishima. And Torishima had a massive influence on Toriyama, both, in, getting him started in Weekly Shonen Jump and also becoming his first editor with Dr. Slump and the beginning of Dragon Ball. I mean, it's just incredible how much Torishima he influenced the franchise and whatnot, and Toriyama's career as a whole. But anyway, the first two manga by Toriyama, which was Wayward World and Mysterious Rain Jack, those are the most pure Toriyama manga, and even Tomato Gold Detective and stuff like that. That was very pure to Toriyama, and it's the most pure Toriyama work because it's 100% him. There's no outside influence because, from his editors and whatnot, because he didn't have any editors. But, he did still get influenced by Western themes and, Eastern themes as well, because, like, Toriyama's first manga that he ever, created was A Wayward World, and it was basically like a samurai and basically samurai set in ancient Japan, and he meets like a superhero from contemporary like settings and whatnot, and then they go off on an adventure. That's the basic plot anyway. So Toriyama, even though it's 100% pure Toriyama experience with no editors and with no external sort of ideas getting thrown across, it is still kind of weird that Toriyama has gotten influence from like Western and Eastern culture. So is it really a pure Toriyama experience, I'd still say yes, but he did get influence from both Western cultures with the superhero archetype getting included into A Wayward World, his first ever manga, and also Eastern culture with these, samurai, being included, and he basically just throws different cultures together and see what sticks, which I really like about Toriyama, but again, also with, the Dragon Ball Z anime and the Dragon Ball GT anime, it's just a mess.
That's where you add in the next monster, man. That is the ultimate beast, I think, of this video. I mean, manga's one thing. That came out, you can argue all you want, but the truest continuity, the truest canon is the original manga, even though it is not Toriyama's full idea. As in, like what we've been saying, the input from outside sources. But the anime adds a completely different level. The anime is what starts Dragon Ball Z in the first place, because there's no such thing as Z in the original manga, it's just Dragon Ball. So, the anime adds Z, so that there's a completely new continuity to talk about. There's a whole new franchise started, and the anime then starts introducing something that all great animes introduce at one part in most of their lifetimes, and that is filler. And that can be a debate for a completely different podcast, but filler is something that is going to skew the continuity and or canon of this TCU franchise even more than it already was from the original manga. I mean, I know that the anime is, simultaneously coming out with the manga, but the layer of the anime being added into that argument makes this even worse. And I think not only having, an anime version with similar events that, could differ or not, can be a problem, especially with a weekly writer like Toriyama and trying to, also make storylines that are working for television, because even if that's not at the front of his head, he's not a script writer or anything, this is still a story that's going to have to take place over on a television screen as well, and essentially the manga will be used as, a storyboard and a reference. So, I mean, it is something to be thought about while drawing these manga panels, and we know that Toriyama, it's kind of out there, very, very socially, unaware, I would say. Maybe that's a wrong word, but very, reclusive inside of himself, and I feel that these small additions to his story maybe not upset him or anything like that, but, I mean, it definitely changes what his original idea was for the story. So, I mean, they're interesting. I like filler. I think you like some filler as well. Most people like some kind of the filler. And just adding the anime and the problems that the anime had, not even mentioning dub problems later on whenever we got to other languages, which adds another beast onto this story, causing the problem of dub changes and retcons and continuity problems, because you're literally making up dialogue for a show instead of translating it. It makes continuity really hard to talk about, and this gets even more skewed when you add in the movies and GT as well. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, it's interesting that you say that Toriyama is, is not a script writer. I mean, that is kind of true. He's a manga artist first and character designer second, but he's also actually written scripts for several productions, not only Dragon Ball, because his first ever movie that he wrote the script for was actually Kosuke and Rikimaru, the Dragon of Konpei Island, which is just interesting, and it's pretty rare to find. It was released in about 1988, and it was basically just an OVA, and it wasn't actually, animated by Toei, and, weirdly enough, even though Dragon Ball was animated by Toei, the anime, but, this little OVA that Toriyama did the script for and character designs and whatnot, was actually animated by a different company, and then he wrote the script for Battle of Gods, which is interesting that we talk about canon, and with Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods, it was written by Toriyama, but the characters were not conceived by Toriyama. Yusuke Watanabe, he originally, conceived Beerus and Whis and the Super Saiyan God, but then Toriyama altered it drastically, so when people say that Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods was written by Akira Toriyama, I mean, yes, that's kind of true, but it's also like, no, it's not. Yusuke Watanabe, he deserves a lot of the credit, and even though that the Super Saiyan God design, and also, and how the Super Saiyan God stuff works, and, how the Beerus, the God of Destruction, how he interacts with, the characters, even though that was extremely different, you gotta hand, some credit to Yusuke Watanabe for making the characters. But that's my tangent on, Toriyama being a scriptwriter aside. Dragon Ball Z, the anime, has a whole range of issues with continuity and what is canon, what's not, because it just changes, and it's almost like another layer to this conundrum. And then if you get GT in the scenario, and then you have Dragon Ball Z Kai, it's ridiculous. I mean, people used to think that Kai and Super were connected, and Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball GT were connected. Now it's just like a free-for-all, because it's like, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, and it's also, if you try to puzzle it together, it's gonna give you a headache and a sore throat and a migraine. So yeah, canon in Dragon Ball, it's ridiculous. It's blown way out of proportion.
I feel that talking about these and showing how absurd trying to connect them is, because people are trying to connect the original Broly to the Broly that's supposed to be in the movie in December. The movie's not even out yet. People are already trying to talk about his power, and they're trying to connect it. Oh, Broly's all canon to Super. No, because Dragon Ball Super is not even on the air right now. At this point, Dragon Ball Super is essentially canceled. It got to finish its run, but it is not coming back right now. There's no confirmation. There's no anything. There's a Dragon Ball Super movie coming out. This could be the last Dragon Ball Super thing we ever see. Is it the last Dragon Ball Super thing I want to see? No, I would love to, continue to see franchise, new name, new movies, whatever. It doesn't matter. I would love to see the continuation of our favorite characters' adventures. But having the audacity to try to compare an old character to a new, especially a character Toriyama had no real input into.
And it's honestly like the Dragon Ball, debating like Dragon Ball continuities and power scale and characters from different continuity, like that sounds fun, and it's all good if you want to do that, and timelines, but just be aware that they were made at different points in time, and, Toriyama is a different man than he was 30 years ago, so his views have changed, his thoughts about the series have changed. That's why, these interviews and retcons exist, because Toriyama's a changed man. He literally grew up with Dragon Ball. Toriyama started developing manga at 23 years of age, or 22 rather, in his early 20s with the Weibo World and stuff, and, submitting for, monthly Young Jump. So, there was a, jump competition called Monthly Young Jump, and essentially, Toriyama started 23 years of age, and, he just kept doing it. So at around, when he started with Dragon Ball, he legit grew up with Dragon Ball and Dr. Slump. And, so Toriyama's a changed man, so it's, kind of... it's kind of annoying to, see, canon debates when Toriyama's, barely even thinking about him, and Toei is even, not even really thinking about them. They only care about money, and that's why they're having Broly. They don't really care about the continuity, and they shouldn't really. I mean, Dragon Ball, it's like, I've said this in past videos, Dragon Ball is not Lord of the Rings, it's not Star Wars, it doesn't have a direct link to one another, so that's basically it. There is no canon, and also, I want all of you guys to count how many times we have said Dragon Ball canon or just the word canon in general, because I'm very curious.
I like that you actually brought up the point about it being okay to make videos, contrasting the different timelines and multiverses of the, TCU. But I'm not mad at people, and I don't want my words or ideas to be misconstrued as that. If you present your ideas with real facts, or at least facts that are visibly seen from the sources that you're pulling for, that's awesome, man. That's what I like to see in this community. Really creative content. But I don't want to see the Broly's not canon or Broly's canon now, because again, it gets back to the last debate. He's not in Dragon Ball Super yet. He's not in a series. He's in a movie, and we're still in movie continuities, and movies don't exist in the canon of the franchise. Even though Resurrection F and Battle of Gods both got a retelling in Dragon Ball Super, doesn't mean that every Dragon Ball Super movie will get a retelling. So that is, one incident that I just wanted to talk about, for this little debate that we're having, because I don't want anything to be too heated. But yeah, I want people to bring a little bit more to the argument if they're going to use the word canon or if they're going to use the word continuity. I just feel that you should back up that word. It's got strong power, and you should use it wisely. And that also gets skewed when you add Dragon Ball Super into the mix, for the major reason of Toriyama being essentially hands-off in the creation of the anime and the manga, and that causes several retcons and, misconstruements of the series, because his manuscripts to Toritaru, who is, writing and, illustrating the Dragon Ball Super monthly manga, he is, doing that. And then we have Toei putting out the episodes based off of notes of those manuscripts from Toriyama, or, off of, ideas from him. I'm assuming, they have his phone number or email or something. It's not like he's that, Unabomber in the forest or anything. I've seen his house on, through photos on the internet. So, you can find him. But I just feel that this makes it crazy, and this just is where it makes it irrelevant. Like, I mean, the GT aspect was one thing, but when Super comes out and says that, oh yeah, this is taking place during the 10-year time skip we talked about in Z, oh yeah, well, now we're adding stuff to that.
The thing with Super's continuity and like Super in general is that even though they're kind of like making sure that like GT almost doesn't exist, they will like Toei will never get rid of GT completely and completely write it off, which could be one of the reasons why they're not going past the end of Z. So that's why they're not going to completely get rid of it, because of Heroes, and because GT, like, even though it is kind of erased, like low-key erased from, like, I guess the Super continuity or whatever you want to call it, like from the the official like continuity, I guess, or streamlined storyline, it is still a part of the Dragon Ball franchise, and for a while it was the ending of the Dragon Ball anime trilogy, like that we had Dragon Ball, and we had Dragon Ball Z, and then we had Dragon Ball GT, and that was it. And originally Dragon Ball GT was going to be in the 10-year time skip, and then they decided on making it after, the end of Z. So it was originally at a time going to be in the 10-year time skip. But anyway, like, speaking of it, like, they'll never erase GT from from the continuity or from the franchise entirely, because it's just a moneymaker. And if they do sort of erase it, it kind of negates like Super Saiyan 4 and all of that. So it's like, why even buy that merch if it doesn't count? So that's why Toei are not going to really completely erase GT from, the continuity, bro. Even though they kind of low-key already did with Super Saiyan Blue and whatnot, and Ultra Instinct, and all of those transformations in Dragon Ball Super. And speaking of Dragon Ball Super, the Dragon Ball Z movies, Battle of Gods and Resurrection F and Dragon Ball Super, it's completely like screwed up, and it's like, it's the same storyline but just retold. So it's like, is Dragon Ball Z Resurrection F and Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods part of like, it's just a headache to figure out, and it's kind of like, what's the point really? Just have fun with it, man. It's like Toei and Toriyama and the people watching in Japan are probably not stressing out about this stuff. It's only in the West, which is weird, and in, English-speaking countries, it's like, why does canon matter? Like, I know, like, I kind of get it, how it's like you kind of want there to be an official sort of timeline all laid out for you, because everyone loves explanations to things, especially in fiction. So when there's not, you kind of want to pick up the scraps and really figure it out, but there's really no point, and you're going to honestly not have a good time with Dragon Ball, and it's going to sort of sour your perceptions on Dragon Ball and your thoughts on Dragon Ball. So it's just have fun with it, man. It's just a wild adventure. Toriyama, 30 years ago, he didn't think there would be a whole entire franchise. I mean, he would end it, he said he was going to end it after a year. I mean, look for, about a year, look what, happened to that plan. That, got thrown out the window pretty quickly. But anyway, so yeah, Dragon Ball, just have fun with it. Toriyama, 30 years ago wasn't like, oh, this is going to be a massive franchise with Dragon Ball Heroes, video games, comics, specials and whatnot. He doesn't really like think about that sort of stuff, so why should you, man? It's ridiculous, and yes, it's fun to speculate and talk about canon from like a ridiculous point of view and power scaling and whatnot, but apart from that, that's really it. So yeah,
so I mean, my final take before we end out the first episode of the Dragon Ball Radio podcast is there is no canon. Have fun with the series, like what you said. Enjoy yourselves. Enjoy the series any way that you want. Japanese, English, Kai, Orange Bricks, Green Bricks, GT. Do what you love. Enjoy the franchise and talk about it. Don't argue over petty little differences to split the community, because that's a problem. We need to bring the community up as a whole and not try to fragment it out. And I just want to make one final takeaway is just be cautious with what words you use. Words are powerful, and you should use them wisely. So I want to thank you guys for tuning in and listening to me and Nathan actually tangent off and ramble about what is canon in the Dragon Ball universe.